Welcome back everyone to ChrisandHisQ. If you click for the title of the video, go ahead and skip down to the 45-second mark. Welcome everyone. I just want to take this time to let you guys know of what is to come on this project car series. As you can see, I got myself some coilovers and aftermarket front and rear suspension that we're going to be putting on our Q45. Those who are savvy on the Y33 platform know that there is not much information on aftermarket parts for the Q45, so I want to be one of the few to include the reviews of the aftermarket parts that do exist. Everything you see will be on my next video on part 3 of this series. Now let's go ahead and start with the video. Running! Welcome back everyone to ChrisandHisQ. We're going to be working on the Q's motor. We're going to be taking this manifold off. We're going to be replacing all the gaskets underneath. Also going to reposition the knock sensors because I did move them once. I'm going to be swapping out every single coil pack. We got 8 to put all around. Also going to be swapping out a little O-ring that goes around the injector. I also got a new hose because this originally was a little bit too big. Later on in the video, I'm also going to replace the fuel pump in the back. We're going to take that guy out, put in our new fuel pump, put it back in, and when we turn this puppy on, it should sound better than new. Let's get this guy apart. So first step to replacing the knock sensors, we're going to go ahead and take this tower brace off. 1 bolt in each side, take those off and you'll be able to take the tower brace off. For me personally, my second step would be to take the air intake off. We're going to be removing a couple different hoses on the side. For mine, it is going to be easier since I don't have the air box in the bottom. I just have a cone filter. But in order to take the air box off, it's super simple and straightforward. Third step I took was removing the wire harness. Started by disconnecting all the oxygen sensors, which is very close to the catalytic converter. If you do have this car, it will be very noticeable. Take those guys off, then start with the throttle body, disconnecting all the TPS sensors. You can go ahead and disconnect your ignition coils as well. Move the whole wiring harness to the side. Then we can start by taking off all the vacuum lines off the intake manifold. Be very careful to not bend these clamps if you will be reusing them. They will most likely not clamp down with the same force if you do bend them. You can then proceed by taking off the accelerator cables. 2 are going to be for the throttle body and 1 is going to be for the cruise control. Once you completed all these steps, you can then start by unbolting the intake manifold. You're going to have a total of 5 screws. For mine, I did take a little brace off that's in the back of the engine block. There's a 2-inch long tab that bolts the manifold down to the motor to reduce shaking. Once you take the intake manifold off, I started by unbolting the fuel rail. There's 4 bolts, 2 in each rail. That will break the fuel rail loose. There's also 3 bolts holding down the PCV tubing for the crankcase and the valve cover. One thing I did not do before trying to remove the fuel rail and the spider altogether was disconnect the fuel rail hoses, so that's what I'm doing right now. Once I had that spider off, I just took the time to go ahead and clean around the oil cap. All my pores were not perfect, so there was a little bit of oil spillage around. Just went ahead and cleaned that guy up. These are the 2 new sensors that I'm going to put in. Originally, the ones that were under there stopped working, went bad, and always had a code. So I ended up installing some on top of the intake manifold. That threw the code away, and I never actually put them back in their original spot. As you can tell, this takes a very long time and you have to take the whole thing apart. But once I got those installed, went ahead and started putting everything back on. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I got these little guys. This is probably the worst one out of all of them. It's cracked all around. I did put Teflon tape because they were leaking, but that's why we got the new ones in. But once you replace them, you pretty much just go ahead and put everything back together. So one thing I did not show, but I did replace, was the intake gasket between the spider and the head. Once I got the spider back on, went ahead and replaced the O-rings for the injectors. In order to get everything nice and flat, went ahead and cleaned the debris off of the fuel rail spacers. Hand tightened everything down, make sure everything was even before going with the drill. Connect all the injectors and make sure everything was nice and plugged before I went ahead and put the manifold on top. As you can tell, those were the 3 little screws that go in the PCV in the back. Once again, go ahead and hand tight all these screws down for the manifold, and then go ahead and tighten down with a wrench or a power tool. Can't forget the coolant hose in the back for the intake and the brake vacuum line. You can then proceed by connecting the rest of the vacuum lines on top of the manifold. Go ahead and plug everything in. Make sure you don't miss anything, because if you do have a vacuum leak, the car will not run smoothly. Reconnecting the gas lines as well. Once you have that, you can proceed with the wiring harness. A tip to reconnecting the wiring harness is always start on one end and don't move forward until all connectors are plugged in. Now, about a month ago, I did replace all spark plugs. I did not replace the ignition coils, which were overdue because a lot of them were cracked and some of the boots were actually starting to leak sparks. I did buy them under a website called Six City Auto, which gave me a steal on all 8. It was less than $400. Anywhere else I can find them in the market, they're usually around $70 to $150 each. As you can tell, Parts Key will run you more than $500. Now, I won't bother you with replacing the other side, but once you're done replacing the ignition coils, go ahead and reconnect all your wiring together. Reconnect your tubing, reconnect your vacuum lines back into your intake. Once you're done with that, the final step I did was go ahead and put back all my accelerator cables. Now here I'm replacing the coolant hose. The only reason I'm doing this was initially, like I explained in my last video, I got an aftermarket radiator for a Miata. The only reason I got this one was because it was the exact specs I was looking for. It was the size I needed, which is really good for this car because it gets quite hot. Now, I didn't keep the original motor driven fan. I got some electrical ones instead. Very good fans from eBay and a good price as well. They only pull about 30 amps total, which is not a lot, and they don't run all the time. The only times they really do turn on is when I'm continuously revving the engine or when I sit through drive-thru way too long. Now, I'm not sure if the additive I put is good enough, but I will let you guys know in the future. But since we're all done with that, let's go ahead and start with the fuel pump. So in order to save a little time on the video, I am not showing how to take the fabric cover off, but it's very straightforward. Will take you less than 15 minutes to do. Little plastic screws, super easy to take off. Once you've exposed the fuel tank, all you would have to do is disconnect the fuel lines. Of course, before doing this, you would want to release the fuel pressure. You can either do this in the morning when the car has not been turned on and has no fuel pressure, or if you just drove your car back home from the parts store and you want to get your fuel pump swapped out right away, go ahead and disconnect the fuel pump relay, crank the engine a couple times, let it die out. Don't worry, you will not harm the engine, but the fuel pressure should go down and do the exact motion I do when taking the fuel pump out, and nothing bad should happen. Alright, got this guy out. We're gonna go ahead and take this very nasty strainer off. So once again, in order to save a little bit of time on the video, I'm not going to show how to take the fuel pump apart. And one thing to always remember when taking something apart, if you're forcing it, it's most likely going to break. So just got this guy done. Got our new pump in there, got our wires connected, got the new shoe or the new sock, whatever you want to call it. Before dropping in the fuel pump, make sure your gasket is on, but go ahead and put the floater in first, twist, then push the sock in. You will then be ready to drop down the fuel pump, align the holes, and bolt everything down. One thing in retrospect that I did not notice until I started editing my video was I did use a power tool. Power tools do create sparks, and I was working with gas fumes, which is very dangerous. So if you are doing this, please do not use any type of power tools while working with gas fumes. So I just got done with the gas pump. It is getting pretty dark outside, so I'm gonna call it here. But I do want to show you guys that the car still runs, and I didn't fuck something up, so you can actually follow this video if you have this car and you want to go ahead and do that yourself. Let's go ahead and remote start. Everything runs good. There's no leakage.
Nice little hum. Alrighty, we'll see you guys tomorrow.
MJ stick it green, sipping on the